This, from this AU chairmanship, a lot should be gained in that. And apologies for interjecting, but you can also touch on that, because as you have mentioned, is that a number of challenges. We never thought of adopting a common currency. We've never had to remove trade tariffs or barriers that hinder a lot of things. Kindly continue.
So I was saying, Raila Odinga is a man of a very strong personality. And as it has been evident in his political engagement in the nation for a period spanning for over 30 years, if he makes it to the AUC chairmanship, Raila Odinga is a man who is capable of breathing fresh air into, I would call it moribund union. Because the aim of what was then OAU was to foster stability and peace in Africa as a continent and to deepen integration of the same. But 60 years down the line, there hasn't been much that we can talk about in terms of achievement by the union. It is worth noting that 61% of its funding comes from its external partners. It is also shamefully though to state that even its headquarters was built by its external partners. The chairman complained that 93% of the decisions made by the union between the years of 2021 and 2023 were not yet to be implemented. So while AU has organs beautiful on paper, the Pan-African Parliament, the African Court of Human and People's Rights, the African Union Commission, the Assembly, consisting of the heads of governments, have refused to donate powers to these organs, making AU a very beautiful thing on the paper, but very ineffective in actual sense. We've continued having cases of instability in Africa, and AU has been reduced to a mere role of mediation. With its decisions never adhered to, it does not have supranational binding powers to compel members to abide by the decisions it makes. The parliament has been reduced to making what they call model laws, which in actual sense is recommendations. So what we need firstly, other than its structural weaknesses, we need a strong personality. And that is what Raila Odinga brings on board. He's a seasoned politician, a man of a very strong personality, experienced on matters leadership. He's been a prime minister of Kenya. He's fought for democracy and creation of democratic space in Kenya. He's dedicated like his entire life in that fight. So AUC would never have gotten a better chairman than Raila Odinga.
All right. And also joining us now is advocate of the High Court and also a leadership and governance expert, Ishmael Nyaribo. Karibu sana, wakili. Asante
sana. Thank you.
We are talking about the AU chairmanship, and we have seen the former Premier, Right Honorable Raila Odinga, as now is officially in State House. A number of countries, of course, we are waiting for them. We've seen some delegations from other countries as well. East Africa region not left behind. I'm picking from where Kim has left and talk about the AU Commission chairmanship needing a very competent and somebody with high personality and caliber. And I'm happy because Kenya as a country, we've set aside our politics, because in the outside world, Raila Odinga was the unofficial leader of the opposition. But we've set that aside and we are propelling him for the seat. What are some of his interests, if at all he is confirmed by the 51 nations?
Yeah, Ben, you know, I keep thinking whether when you have a show, like when you have something happening around where you are, the rest of the world is watching. And right now, you know, we have been having a lot of, you know, push and pull back and forth in Kenya about political machinations, who is better, who is worse, who is smarter in political field. And little did many of us know that the world is actually watching when you are doing all those things. So when Raila's candidature comes up, and you can see now the government of Kenya, facilitating other presidents to come in. These other presidents have been looking at what we do. And by the way, what we have been doing might be good for Raila or bad for Raila.
Why is that?
I mean, what I'm saying is, how do countries around us perceive our politics? How do they perceive our policies? So that it is normally not just a fact that you are doing some internal thing about a country. The country can hold you so very highly depending on how you conduct yourselves. So by the time African nations many of them are, coming together to stand behind Raila Odinga, it is the kind of democratic space that has been built in the country. All these teething problems we've been having, whether it's riots, whether it's education system, whether it is our tourism, whether it is the weather itself, neighbors normally are watching us. Who are these people? So I think you saw that Somalia earlier was planning to contest, and again they gave up that, and I think Djibouti is still on the race or something.
Yes, Djibouti is.
You see, so whenever you do something in your own house, please remember that the neighbors are watching you. We've been talking about a Kenya education system. You've seen some smaller things where you say, oh, the governor does not have a degree, or some member of parliament doesn't have a degree. That looks like a small thing. But it compromises the way other people interpret you. So when you see Raila being, celebrated like this, where presidents of the region want to come in and try, to support him for his candidature, and we still have smaller problems like he has left us. Why is he supporting the ruling coalition? Well, Raila has been, But when you look at him actually, and from what he has been telling the country, what he has been telling the world, he is a Pan-Africanist. He is a guy who has deep history and a knowledge of African continent as a whole and the politics of the African nations. So I think it will be a big plus for the country, first and foremost, if Raila Odinga were to sit at the African Union seat. In as much as we're talking about, my brother is saying, this is like a toothless dog, it has no teeth to bite. The truth of the matter, if you look at even the ICC, the method through which they can implement their decisions is always complex. It depends on member states' cooperation to effect whatever rules or laws that are being created within that particular organization. So the same for the African Union. There's nothing much you can do really unless there's cooperation from member states, and strongly so. If they want to strengthen the structures, the policies, it is all about member states. But if look at Arusha, for example. I mean, we have the East African Court of Justice, isn't it?
Yeah.
What can it do unless Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, these countries are the ones to implement whatever order or directives that will be issued by such courts? This is not like municipal local courts. I mean, a country's courts where you have police to effect the orders. This depends on the goodwill of the member state countries. So it is so exciting to see neighbors come together actually, even if they be 5 or 10 of the 54 to support the move by Kenya. And I think Djibouti should rethink its decision to continue competing with a friendly neighbor. Yeah.
But actually the Djibouti, they have Anil Gayan, who has been touted as could pose a very big challenge to the former premier. But away from that, remember the candidate has to be supported by 2/3 of the member states, who are 51 for now, because with the exception of Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, because of the war in their country. That is 34 countries out of 51 countries. And as you can see, that the South Sudan president, who has just arrived and is being welcomed by his host, that is President William Ruto. And as I had mentioned earlier, is that the invitation was not just a Kenyan affair. We had extended that invitation to other countries of the region as well. So it seems that the function could be starting not very far from now. But Doc, I'm looking at the Africa Union, and Kimani mentioned something which is very true, that we have a myriad of challenges and we are quite slow in sorting them out. One thing that could really boost the African Commission is an adoption of a common currency. And that we have not done because of a number of reasons. And this could be the silver bullet if the former Premier, Honorable Raila Odinga, clinches this seat.
I think it is important for us to first understand the architects of how the African Union was formed. Secondly, we need to look into the challenges that likely to face anyone who will be heading that union. As it has been mentioned, one of the challenges that will be faced is from the member states themselves, who are not giving into the the union that they have formed. And if there is no goodwill from member states, then the union is as good as a shell. Secondly, don't forget there is an external factor. International world, Western countries, both East and West, they will not want to have Africa as one continent that is governed by one currency. Mohamed Gaddafi started that, saying the African currency will be the gold. And you remember what happened. Mohamed Gaddafi's country was toppled with no reason, and that country now today is in tatters. Now, knowing that, whoever will be leading the African Union must play, his game in a manner that will not going to affect overall the stability of Africa.
Yes.
Secondly, there are quite a number of good things that comes with if African Union unites on three things. One, on currency or a common currency. Two, on political union, where we will have an African president. Look at United States. United States is a massive continent, and yet the countries, the sister countries, have become states. They are being ruled by their own governors with their own bylaws, but the continent is ruled by one single president. And the design of appointing a president is so transparent that each state must represent and place their people there. So if we must have a strength in the African Union structure, then the common currency, the common political platform, and open door policy in terms of movement, visa-free, and of course trade and stay. So if all those are achieved, then we will have an African Union that is not just a skeleton, and that is not only dependent on other people, but that can depend on its own strength. Secondly, resources. African countries have a lot of resources. Besides the fact that we always rush to IMF and other funding institutions, African countries can establish their own common pool, funding pool, and run their African Union more superior than even United Nations, if the will is there from the member states. So if resources are mobilized and there will be no external influence in terms of goodwill from member states, and the fact that there are no conditions given to you by international funding institutions, then you are able to manipulate and change the trajectory of the African Union Commission's setup. And therefore, we shouldn't be calling it actually a commission. A commission is a small establishment that is agreed upon to carry out some few tasks. We should remain at African Union as a region, as a continent. And therefore, we could even call it an African state. Or we change the name of African from the current name which were given to us by the colonists to going back to our indigenous name. Africa used to have another name, and the name it used to have is the one which used to unite this continent. But now, because we have been branded as the black, you know, there are quite a number of things that colonists have left with us, and we are still embracing it. We are the ones who are entertaining it, including naming ourselves as well as naming even our lands. You will find the streets of Nairobi, shops are being erected, and someone, instead of giving his indigenous name to the premises of his business, he goes and looks for a name in a Western country. What are you trying to say? Is it that you have disowned yourself and now given out your dignity to other people, so to the extent that you feel shy to use your own name and using other people's names as a brand? These are the beginning of some of the things like that needs to be looked into in having a well-established African state. Thirdly, look at some nations like Spain, Norway, Sweden. You know, those are small islands. Do you know those countries have not embraced another language? They are all using their own language, and those languages are not spoken in other countries. But the nation, the people, the nation dictates that people who are living in those states must use their language. English is not a priority for them. Why is Kiswahili not an African continental language? So that we forget about all these foreign languages and use our language. And then whoever wants to come in here, because our businesses are being transacted in our own indigenous language, then they will be subjected to adopting our language, and Africa will have been known for common currency, common language, common trade platform, and common movement. Look at the number of languages that are spoken in Africa, and we can't even communicate to each other. Just go to Rwanda, which has been a French colonist. They are not very far from us. They are West African. Look at Congo. They speak French. We speak English. Tanzania is the only nation who insisted that their business and their education system must be administered through the Swahili language. And if we take that route, Africa will be far beyond where we are now, and Africa will get respect from other continents as much as all other challenges we also facing now. Go ahead.
Doc is talking about, you know, this is big. I don't know. This is big because, I mean, you're saying we try and indigenize the African Union at that level, and you're not teaching children Swahili in school. I mean, there are some schools that are not teaching Swahili. You get what I'm saying? Or curriculums which don't allow our children to study Swahili all the way to probably, let's say, the Form 4 or the A level in the international curriculum, for example. So these localizing things should start from mashinani.
Yes.
Solutions and problems should be solved at the local level.
And maybe the moment that some countries have started embracing Swahili,
yeah,
a good
you saw
example is
that.
South
Yes,
Africa.
yes.
This brings us closer to that goal.
In the lawyers' meeting in Mombasa, there was a minister from Tanzania, and he told us that you know, all their laws are in Swahili. So, but again, he said because the dialect in Tanzania would be different from the one in Kenya. People should come together and agree which dialect can we use, so that no one feels that, okay, you are using a deep Swahili from Tanzania. Because if you talk about the Rwandese people, they can talk Swahili actually, but they would be talking Swahili influenced more by French than
And Lingala,
us.
yeah.
Even the Congolese people, they speak Swahili, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think that the problem is, like he said, we have been, the whole system is rigged before we are even born. I mean, you come into the classroom, you are given, these are the subjects, you read the English history of the Portuguese and you read the British history, but you hardly can read the African history in its context, the way we lived. So I think it's a big thing And we cannot live, we cannot just imagine that Raila can actually bring some magic in the African Union, but he can influence. At least he can start with language, and then he can go into now policies, and then, you know, he may propose currency. I mean, that again, member states must be willing to let go their currency. By the way, if we unite, even in 5 years alone, we will be a very strong currency against the dollar. Even in 5 years alone. If Africa unites and says we want to use, which will be a big threat to the established economies, in 5 years alone, you realize we actually are just our money is as strong as the dollar. So I think we really need to start down. That's my whole point here.
Yes. You know, I think firstly we need to understand the fundamental problems of AU. I want you to imagine 54 or 55 liberal states who could not do their own headquarter, and China had to do it for them. I also want to look at 55 liberal states and the funding of their core union. 61% is done by the external partners. Then it goes without saying that who pays the piper will call the tune. If you want to understand where our problems as Africa sprout from, it's because we have foreign interference in our affairs that is so deep-rooted, and that we've allowed it to be so to an extent that we don't even want to fund our own union. Can you imagine 61% of the funding of the affairs of African Union is done by the external partners? That they did our own headquarter that we want to send Raila Odinga to. That is where our problem lies. Now, Africa, 30% of global mineral reserves in the world are found in Africa. It constitutes 28% of the GDP of Africa, and it also contributes 70% of the exports that come from Africa. But again, it is also worth noting that 39% of the undernourished populations of the world are found in Africa. So we have very heartbreaking statistics coming from Africa, a very wealthy nation, but again that is doing so badly because it has allowed stranglehold by the external partners with vested interests. And we are the ones who've done it to ourselves. If the chairman complains that 93% of decisions that have been made in 3 years have not been complied with by the member states, then you understand what we call the AU assembly of the member states. When we have the most of corrupt leaders coming from Africa, how do you expect that these leaders are going to cede their sovereignty to AU to give it supranational binding powers to compel members to abide by the rules? When you want to conduct elections for the sake of it, because you've chosen you are going to be a life president of your state, whether you are corrupt or not. In Africa, we all know that the richest people are not found in business. They are found in politics. That tells you how corrupt we are. So I think if we truly want, Africa Union will always be beautiful on the paper. It can only be as strong as the member state chooses it to be. If the member states really want, we are 60-year-old. We are not a young man. We are not a child. We are an old man. 60-year-old, we don't have common currency. 60-year-old, we don't have a common language. 60-year-old, we don't have free trade and integration in Africa. 60-year-old, we still can't fund our own budget.
Kamau, what is the reason for that? You know, really honest analysis.
Yeah.
What is the reason for that? Raila has been in this country trying to win elections every other season, and he doesn't win. If he wins, he does not get it, isn't it? What has he been doing? I mean, I think it's a very practical example. He tries to really fix this. It doesn't work over here. He goes here. Until now he's tagged. He has now a different name. You see? Now we call him a guy who is in business, in politics. But reality of the matter, this is very honest analysis, but just can you imagine of the answer? What is the answer?
The answer is we must start with the basics.
Yes, yes.
And we must be willing to start with the basics, as Daktari and Wakili says.
Yeah.
We must first of all say,
if it's a language, if
we
it's
need our own language as a continent that we can trade with. We need to open up our boundaries for free trade. We need to fund our own affairs. We need to start liberating ourselves from political interference from the foreign partners. We need to reclaim our independence as a union first, then we go to the basics, and the culmination of it all should be adoption of a currency, because if 70% of our export as Africa is minerals, and we know that how lucrative is the business of minerals trading in the world, then if we could adopt a currency of our own and decide that we shall be trading our minerals in our own currency, then you can rest assured that African Union would be a very strong union.
Kimani, just hold on. That is the President of the Republic of Tanzania, Madam Suluhu Hassan, who has just entered the State House. Also one of the many guests that have been invited, President William Ruto welcoming her to State House just before the function for the Raila Odinga Africa Union Commission chairmanship bid begins in earnest. Kindly continue.
So what I'm saying is that the member states, as it has been alluded by my fellow discussants, need to sit down and agree. Do we really need this African Union? And then they need to come up with a policy document on what is the future and how should the future look like. What do you want to achieve and within what time?
Yeah.
Then they commissioned Rwandan president to do so. He came up with wonderful proposals that are gathering dust on the shelves where the proposals were kept. So we need to be serious as member states of the African Union. We need to start from the basics, and we need to start bringing on board very strong personalities as leaders of the union. And then there should be concerted effort by willing members to leave behind those who are not willing to abide by decisions.
Very well.
Kenya as a nation has come very far. I can tell you, in Africa, Kenya is a beacon of hope. Everybody aspires to be Kenya in Africa, because our democratic space has been so open to a point that even sometimes US wonders how we came here. We have one of the best constitutions. We conducted the recent general elections was referred as the best ever conducted, and even after that, we still went to Supreme Court to find out whether it was good enough. That tells us how far we've come as a state.
Okay.
And others, I can
yes. Gentlemen, there's something that we should look at, and especially before these functions start, and that is something that has been plaguing this country for years on end: unity and security. As we speak, countries like Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger will not be voting in this round because of the instability, the security challenge that they have in the country. Doc, you bear me witness, we've had issues with Somalia. We will bear me witness, we've had issues between DR Congo and Uganda at the border.
And Tigray.
The West African nation, I don't know how many coups we've had in the last 5 years alone. Even Khartoum, we can see Sudan. Actually, I saw one feature on YouTube talking about the forgotten war, because there are no efforts in Sudan to bring people together on the negotiating table. They are facing one of the worst droughts ever. This is something that has plagued even other commission chairs, and we are wishing the Right Honorable Raila Odinga all the best. If he clinches this seat, this is something that he has to address, something that has not been addressed by his predecessors.
I think, to start with, I don't think if we have a lot of hope in terms of Honorable Raila's performance.
Why are you pessimistic? The vote has not been counted.
You know why I'm saying? No, it's not about the vote. I mean, in terms of when he clinches the post. I mean, there's no magic that he will go into play in changing the whole dynamics of African Union. The only thing I see is that he must find a way of fighting the foreign interference. Africa will be much better if you block the foreign ideology and make sure that nobody compromises the African desire and introduces things that does not add value to Africa. Quite often, our presidents, African presidents, have loyalties to foreign institutions other than even loyalty to the country that they govern. And this is because of three things. One, we think that if we lose loyalty, or rather failing to pledge your loyalty to one of the foreign states, then you will lose your seat. Secondly, you think that the resources you are stealing there will be accountability. And once accountability comes, none of our African states, heads of states will actually succeed in their role as a president of that nation. But having said that, look at the dynamics of African continent, where you will find every other time there is a coup, or there is political instability, or there is other factors like external crisis. And if Raila clinches this position and he goes to AU, will he going to sleep like in all other AU chairs that we had before? Because the immediate one currently, people term him as a dormant AU chair for the time he has been there. But I don't think so. Sometimes you go into such institutions, you find some regulations that has been set within the institution, and you will not be given opportunity to actually come up with your own idea. You will be given a blueprint where you must either follow or you will be silenced. And the people who will be used are the people he will be working with, the commissioners and the other secretariats he works with. These are the people who have already been trained to make sure that whoever comes with a different idea other than that one of their masters, then will not going to succeed. I think we need to understand the foundation of AU versus what a commissioner within AU can do. Because the commissioner is actually a small entity. It is supposed to be backed by the state, individual, African states. If the backup there is minimal, and the commission itself has been given a blueprint that they should follow, the fact that they are being funded, then I don't think if Raila can just go there and make any difference. The only thing the hope I have is that because he's a senior citizen and he does not care whether people comply to what he says or not, and when you are a senior citizen, you are free to say whatever you want, and sometimes you can even force some things, although you will get stuck. He may use that leverage to make sure that he introduces some policies that will be of beneficial to Africa. But I don't think if you will be able to address issues of conflict within Africa. Secondly, because conflict in Africa is not an African, it's an external conflict. And external conflicts that are used to bring, to collide people within the country is very difficult to control. For example, look at Somalia. Somalia, for the last 34 years, they are fighting on nothing. And you may not even understand why Somalia is fighting when you go deep there. But again, you will find Al-Shabaab has the latest weapon in the country. They have no access to any seaport. They have no access to any airport. And yet, they have the latest machinery to go and fight.
And they're not even being manufactured.
And they are not even manufactured in the country. So what does that tell you?
And even in the continent.
What does that tell you? The latest machinery. These are people who are in the bush. You are being told they are Al-Shabaab. So I think we have a bigger problem than what we think is a problem at the moment. But mine is that we hope that Baba, once he gets there, and I know he will get there because our president is very tough in mobilizing other presidents. Look, it has never happened. I mean, during the time of Ambassador Amina Mohammed, we have never seen presidents coming here and being campaigned for. So our president has taken a different approach to the campaigns of AU office. So if he has brought all these African head of states in the country here to campaign for them, imagine Mama Suluhu has other friends in West Africa, and she will going to talk to all those ones. Salva Kiir might have some other friends in North Africa. He will talk to them. All these other presidents he has brought together will going to have an impact in terms of influencing other presidents who are not present today. Because those who are present today are already agreeing to the candidatureship of Raila Amolo Odinga and the candidatureship of Kenya, basically, because it is Kenya that is bidding for the office. When you are going to such office, it is the country that is presenting someone. Some countries have no people to present even. So it is good that we have quite a number of people who are able to take tasks at the regional and global level, regardless of whether they fail to clinch the seat. People know that Kenya is placed in a very high level in terms of international arena and regional arena.
All right. And gentlemen, allow us to take a quick break, but we will be back. But when we come back, Wakili, I would like us to look at also the foreign interference, because we've had a lot. Look at Libya. Look at Niger. Look at Central Africa Republic. We are having the Wagner from Russia. We are having some groups from French, of which even some countries have said we really don't need this foreign influence. But we will be looking at that when we come back. But all eyes are on State House, where we are looking at former Prime Minister Honorable Raila Odinga's bid to the AU chairmanship, which is being officially launched by President William Ruto, together with a host of other presidents, including Dr. Salva Kiir, and we also have Suluhu Hassan. We are expecting more, and as soon as that function is up in air, we will be broadcasting to you live. But let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with these gentlemen and this discussion.
Mtazamaji, tumekuandalia taarifa zinazogonga vichwa vya vyombo vya habari kutoka hapa jijini Nairobi na pia mashinani.
Wanahabari zaidi ya ubora wao wako ange kukuletea habari pindi zinapochipuka kutoka pembe zote za Kenya.
Kwenye kipindi cha Tamrini tunakuletea mazungumzo ya moja kwa moja kufafanua na kuangazia masuala yanayokuhusu wewe mtazamaji.
Kumbuka, taarifa yenye thamani daima hupokewa kwa amani.
Hivyo basi usikose kuungana nasi kila siku ya wiki.
Tukupakulie na tukutaarifu taarifa yenye mnato kwenye runinga unayoienzi. Kwenye kurunzi mashinani,
sisi DC.
Thank you for joining us on Healthy Living. Stay connected to Voice of America at voanews.com. A look at your kidneys and how they impact your health. And an expert discusses chronic kidney disease and how to protect yourself. And Ivorian psychologist Noor Bakayoko shares some insights on bullying and what can be done.
It's important to avoid major events or major health crises.
How do you know if your cough is due to a serious condition? We'll have some answers. Stay well
and strive to make every day a healthy day.
Give me a heart attack. Why are you talking? You're confusing us.
Confusing you? How? I thought I was out of place. Why don't you go back to your bossy mother and ask her for your forgiveness? And pray very hard that she welcome you back. Because clearly you are not meant for this class.
Come on, is this a joke?
Of course it is not a joke.
You haven't even written your name. Can you go and wait for me in the office?
Mr. Tisha, I have been here for so long, so if you don't mind, I have a pressing matter I need to handle.
How about I give you all a pressing issue?
Welcome back to KBC News Check, and many thanks for keeping me company together with my three guests, beginning from Dr. Harun Isaka-san, a governance expert. Just next to him, we have Kimani Mwangi, also a governance expert, and just next to him, we have Ishmael Nyaribo, who is an advocate of the High Court and also a political commentator. We are looking at what you're seeing on the left of your screen, which is the Africa Union Commission chairmanship bid by Right Honorable former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who already is one of the three candidates. We're also looking at Mohamed Yusuf of Djibouti, who many people say could pose a big threat to Raila's bid, and also Richard Randiamandrado of Madagascar. Remember, the candidate has to get 2/3 of the vote, and that we're talking about 34 or 51 votes. That is the countries as well. The vote will be carried out in February of next year. But as we are looking at that, we're trying to step back and look at some of the challenges that have plagued this continent and at the Africa Union. And some of them have never been sorted out. We're looking at also the many conflict in the continent, many coups, and as the gentlemen have rightly put it, also interference from beyond. Wakili, I mentioned that, and I think Kim has also mentioned about the interference, and also Doc has talked about interference. We wouldn't want a position where our former premier is going to be just rubber stamping things that have been said, and a lot of influence from the foreign. We were looking at security as well. West African countries, a number of them have had many coups, many lives lost. We've seen peace efforts, the border of Uganda and the DR Congo. We have seen a major conflict in Sudan and South Sudan. We also had an issue with Somalia. You do remember the maritime case that was at The Hague? So we are having a number of conflicts, which some could be bloody and others are not. But at the end of the day, we are also looking at the foreign interference. I'm looking at Libya. I'm looking at Central African Republic. We've seen the Wagner, which is a group from Russia, being backed by the government. And we do remember, I think it was in Burkina Faso, when they were saying that they do not want their resources and those French companies that are interfering in their affairs. This is something that we've been having for a very long time.
See,
and the new chairman will have also a rough time.
Yes, but you know, you have to look at power and resources. This is all that people are fighting for. In fact, the whole aspect of going to State House of any country is to ensure you are the one on the seat of distributing the resources in the country. And how you distribute these resources is what matters to the people. You look at Rwanda, where it came from to where it is today. It was all about, people felt that a certain a community were in office all through and not the others. And why do people feel that a certain community has gone to office longer than others? It is not because a certain tribe has really gone to State House, but it's because how do you distribute resources when you are in power? Do you distribute resources only to your people, friends, and your tribe? This is where the problem is. And so when you talk about Libya, talk about Niger, talk about Senegal, the problem there is these are countries with huge deposits of minerals. And the foreigner, you talk about interference. Other foreign bodies want to do mining there. They want to galvanize the country. They want to make sure that they are the ones who are creating policies. They want to, influence gangs to come up so that... So when you talk about interference, where do you stop? If I may pose a question, is Kenya interfering in Haiti? You see, where do you say, if now we have invited Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi as our neighbors and friends, isn't it? Are they interfering in our affairs? The answer is no. These are friends, isn't it? We also have interests in their country. Why? Because our people are also in those countries. So the line between interfering and partnering in friendship can be thin. The biggest problem is not that we have so many people from Poland here today, or from Japan, or from China. The problem is, how do we want to manage resources? When you talk about tenders in the country, who is being given the lucrative tenders in government. How do you distribute that? That is the point where a foreigner comes into Kenya and determines that Dr. Isaac wants this tender, and the Kamau also wants this tender. So he simply comes in between, because human hearts are all known. Nobody doesn't want to eat, quote unquote. We all have stomachs. We're hungry every now and again. In fact, in a few 2-3 hours, you'll still want to eat. So a foreigner takes advantage of the fact that there are so many deposits in this country. You know, we used to have oil in Turkana. Is that true? I don't know where it went. Is it still existing? I don't know. So the problem for me is resources and how they are managed. If resources are managed correctly, look at the countries like Netherlands, where you do not even know if a prime minister is passing. Because, so what? Everybody has resources they need to live. If that happens in this country, I'm telling you, there will be no fights about who is going into State House. So when Raila goes to the African Union, our prayers is clearly, he should demonstrate what he has been talking about. You know, zero tolerance to corruption, encouraging member state countries to implement policies that discourage corruption and punish any corruption, so that nobody is actually gifted for being very corrupt. It will not be an easy walk in the park, but if Raila Odinga in his five-year tenure can actually try to do that, so that you know, the peers, African presidents, would always point at a corrupt president and say, no, that is not correct. He may succeed by reducing corruption by 50%. If we reduce corruption in African nations by only 50%, not 60, 50% only, then the coming generation will pick up from there, and you will find that now resources don't have to this question of shareholding government and all that kind of nonsense will never come up now. Now people will know that as long as we have a head of state in State House.
Wakili, I think there's one point that Wakili has not yet understood. Wakili, in the African Union, like any other international body, it will be very difficult for anyone to access resources and malpractice it. It is very difficult. The only thing he will get out of that place are his allowances and his salary, and of course any other privileges that it comes with. But in terms of the African Union resources, it is very, very difficult.
No,
it's like the UN one.
No,
but the point, I mean, it came like that. But I think the point you wanted to bring forward is that can Raila introduce policies that will going to influence African states in diminishing corruption. Not reducing corruption. You can't reduce.
Right.
You must
we will
diminish
be touching on corruption.
So, we will get there.
Because,
but I think
it's all the countries have that issue.
But I think neocolonialism and issues of colonization is still the problem of Africa. There is no any other problem. Colonization is still with us. What do I mean? Wakili, what is your name? You had beautiful names in your indigenous home. You decided to take John. You decided to take Paul. Why is it that you leave your beautiful name? I love Tanzanians. You have seen Tanzania, not Tanzanians, sorry, Ugandans. You will not see any foreign name being named after anyone. Read Museveni's name. It's all his indigenous name. So we have, the challenge we have is ideologically we have been colonized, and colony has remained with us in our mindset. There is no one time we want to think our own way, the African way. We always want to think the Westerners' way. And that is why you see...
I don't even want to cut him,
but Wakili, that is why when we wake up in the morning, instead of putting up in our African attire, we all put up a suit.
Look at India. Dr. Look at India. You know, we are trying to resolve this issue at point 9, but there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And like we said, this has to start afresh. Julius Nyerere tried that. He was not even supported by Kenya and Uganda. Are you seeing? So it is tricky, but what we are saying is we can be proud as a country. I know India as an example. They are so proud. You try to say Mercedes-Benz has to go into India. They actually ask for rights
to manufacture a modified form of Mercedes-Benz. And they get those rights. Why? Because they are many. Look at China. I mean, China still wear a suit. It doesn't mean that China was wearing suits before. So even these superficial issues we are talking about, forget them. The issue is self-pride. I mean, the self-confidence of a nation. Is this being created by State House? I mean, when you make children run in the street like, you know what, I mean, beat them, shoot them, kill them, are they going to be confident about their country? So it must start somewhere. And I started by saying that we may do a show ourselves in a corner, but somebody's watching us. And the people watching us will conclude that Kenya as a nation is behaving like this. But without looking at the negatives, for now, what actually they are doing to Raila Odinga, again, we are being watched by the world, and people are like, oh, this is a small African country which is extremely democratic. So, and I think going forward, much as I agree totally with Daktari, the point I'm saying, we should not just cry. I mean, we are here. We find ourselves at this stage. Like I said, the system is fully rigged. Whatever you try today, you want to teach Swahili, you want everybody, we'll all listen to you, but the system is rigged. The child wants to go and not only speak English, but speak it the way the Americans and the British people are speaking it. So while we are there, we can try to reduce those overtures, those imitations, but at least 0.5%. And that's why I said when Raila goes out there, I didn't mean, if the viewers got me that way, it's wrong. What I mean is let him influence policies. You know, it's all about member states. Yes. Where any member, any AU member who is corrupt or at least suspected of corruption, the AU can do what? Can actually call for a meeting and try to discuss that issue. That, I'm telling you, if you tag people, you saw what Gen Z did. I mean, once they tag you, you're like, I don't want to be staki kusalimiwa. So if we can, if Raila can stand by his Pan-African spirit and start now, influencing, policies, calling, member states, creating committees within member states, and then say that what we must finish from Africa is rampant corruption, at least within government institutions in member state countries. This will happen.
It's a good thing that you mentioned corruption, and something else that a number of African countries have not been able to do is adherence to human rights and the rule of law. Kimani, you bear me witness, during the Gen Z demonstrations, the UN, they sent a statement, even the US sent a statement. We didn't see any statement from the African Union, unless I didn't see it. But this is a cry that we just don't live like people in the matatu. We are all going to town, but you don't know who is this guy, what he does. You see, when there are so many conflicts in the continent, and we kind of, as a union, we are almost quiet. Look at South Sudan. It's more or less being called the forgotten war.
What we should be asking ourselves is, what is the fate of the likes of Sankara, Kwame Nkrumah, right, Lumumba? They were the young thugs of the OAU of 1963. If only you could review their speeches when OAU was formed, and what they envisioned for the OAU, then you ask yourselves, where are those great men of Africa today? If you want to see how entrenched is the negative interference by the foreign partners of OAU has been, to a point where they are willing to silence any voice that could take away the cake from them. Now, it is open secret that in Africa we have great leaders who are doing great jobs to liberate their nations and to turn them into model economies in Africa. We have countries that are doing very well. Kenya is one of them. We are number 8 strongest economy in Africa, in as much as we are not endowed with mineral reserves as other nations. I think salvation of AU is in one thing: willing member states influencing decisions from the inside. If Kenya is willing, if South Africa is willing, if Tanzania is willing, they can start influencing decisions. Those ones that won't ruffle the feathers much, like, can we open up Africa for trade? Right? Like, we've been trying, we have our own EAC. We have a full minister of EAC integration. We have Yala Parliament, where we have donated a member of parliament to sit and talk about the policies of East Africa integration. Yet, years down the line, we still haven't been able to open up EAC for trade and for free movement of people. Basic things that should have been done a long time ago. Now, if EAC, if AU really must be worth its salt, then we need to have willing member states influence decisions and start imposing sanctions on those who are not living by the decisions that have been made. They must start donating powers to these organs. We have a Pan-African Parliament as an organ of AU. But again, what it does are model laws, which are purely recommendations. We have AUC, where Raila Odinga is meant to sit and chair, which is the executive organ of the AU, which should be like the disciplinarian, which should be the one to compel member states to implement the decisions that have been made. But then we have the assembly, where now the demagogues from Africa sit. Those who've chosen, they have elected themselves leaders for life. The corrupt ones who have offshore accounts, the billionaires of this world, who've chosen that to them, it's about them and their family affairs. Those where you hear the father is a president, the son is a deputy, or the son is a minister.
Or even the general.
Yeah, the general, yeah? No, when you have such free presidents like William Ruto, those who've been democratically elected, those from South Africa and other states, need to sit down and say, now, we must be done with this hogwash. We must start deliberate actions of empowering AU. We must start entrenching discipline among our member states. Unless that happens, the only thing we can hope is that let us give AU a chairman, not for them, but for us now, so that we increase our standing geopolitically as a nation, so that we increase our competitiveness as a nation in East Africa, so that our name becomes big out there, and we can benefit by having a state that has competed among others and produced a chairman who can go try to do his best and give us a good name that would give us business as a nation. I think that's the only thing we can hope for. Yeah. Unless the day when the member states choose, it is time to make this thing work.
Yeah. And Doc, we've been talking about opening up the continent. When we come to trade, we have so many barriers, even cross-border barriers. When we come to travel, there is a visa, there's so many things in the continent. Maybe if the Honorable Raila Odinga clinches the seat, he should borrow a leaf from President William Ruto, who opened up the country for everyone from the continent and everyone from the world, which could help us even stir and foster relations that we've been talking about, which would foster trade as well.
I think, Ben, we are having a lot of hope on
we should manage our expectations.
The EU chair, and we must expect and manage our expectations. I think we are not, to be sincere with you, we are not expecting much magical to happen with AU. The fact that Raila is likely to become the chair. The reason is, Honorable Raila has been in East Africa, he has been in Kenya, and he has been a very instrumental person in terms of politics in East Africa. Why are we not able to manage East Africa and show the other part of Africa as an example that this can really work? Why did we not get a common thread? Why did we not get a common, okay, there's a common passport called East African passport. But do you think it is East African passport? Why? Because each country has its own name, and that's not East African passport. East African passport, Kenya. Ideally, when you are having the AU passport, it is just written AU passport. It doesn't tell you which country. Secondly, why were we not able to get a common currency for East Africa? And yet, our presidents in the 7 nation, East African nation, are always together. Why don't they decide and say, with this parliament of ours, can they approve and have a currency, at least just a common currency? And when we have the East African currency, this signals to other African nations that indeed countries can have a common currency and prosper in that currency. And I'm sure that currency, as Wakili and my colleague has mentioned earlier on, will be more stronger than any other individual country or state currencies. And therefore, what magic will he going to do in African nation with 55 or 54 nations? 54 nations. What magic will he do to achieve all those things that we are putting as our expectations? And yet, he has not done a single move in East Africa.
When actually there were
when Africa it was just 3 nations only.
3 nations.
So I think it is like, before I get there, just Wakili, you know, there's what is called
too negative.
No. I'm trying. No. I'm not actually negative about it, but I'm trying to tell you the reality that we shouldn't be so much hopeful to the extent that you lose your expectation, and tomorrow we will start again talking about Raila. Yeah, he said he will do this. He has never done. No, actually, the business ahead of Raila is to just go and sit in that executive office and do the necessary responsibility as an executive chair of the AU, and nothing but just follow the policies that has been already instilled there. You cannot even change, because it has to be approved by EU and UN for you to alter any,
to ratify anything.
This is the problem of being an internal insider. You know, I think having been with the UN, you say?
Yeah.
That's the problem. Because you are subjective. You are not objective. You are going to imagine that things are hard the way you know them. Raila has not been in UN, for example, though he knows these things. But let him go. You know, some things happen when you have the passion and the will, even if there are hurdles. At least the East African community, we've tried. I mean, got some passport at least. It's a passport. We have what in East Africa we have what? We have a good working relationship. We have common trade. You can go to Tanzania easily, go to Uganda easily. The problem with why we have not excelled, we have already addressed that. This is the issue of foreign interference. You know, if you talk about Kenya and talk about Mali and talk about Mozambique, there are agreements like AGOA, you know, which bind this region and not the other region. The COMESA, which would bind South African countries, but not the North Africans. So, and the foreigners, this is what, correctly you said, they have actually rigged the system in the sense that they will make a partnership under AGOA with certain countries, including our own country, but that agreement is not what is obtaining in South Africa. Now, they then go and make so the whole process is they are antagonizing us. So by the time we say we want to do regional business or African business, the big brother is saying, hey, remember you have an agreement with me that says certain things which I did not know would actually prevent my free relationship with my neighbor. This is where the problem is. Now we have the Africa Continental Free Trade Act, agreement, which an act as well also, which was enacted some 4 or 5 years ago, and it is going to be a leading light for people like Raila Odinga. He's a Pan-Africanist. He has an agreement in place. He has, and it talks about all these things, by the way, in terms of put people together, use one currency, and there is no magic. Anybody who has done some little bit of research up to university's second or third year, even before graduation, you get to understand that we are tied into some web that you cannot fix just in an evening. But in terms of Raila Odinga, I don't think he's going to the union just to have tea and sit there. And if he sees any policies that actually are against what he believes in, I am very sure he will raise them up with the secretariat, he will raise them up with the chairman of various institutions and also member states. If he can do that alone, that's fair enough, because even if you don't implement, but you raise issues, you say, hey, you know what? The kind of document I've been given to use, it is completely bad. Look at what it is saying. Then member states can sit down and then mandate the secretariat to change and bring this thing we said of influencing member states towards coming out of corruption. Now I also get Daktari is very passionate about now coming out of neocolonialism. So that we say, look at Rwanda. You know, we have live examples. Kagame tells off everyone, even Museveni himself. He tells off everyone. He tells them, who told you human rights is the way you are interpreting it. So I think we also need to be proud as I agree, as East Africans, and then as Africans. William Ruto started this in his first week of office. He was being celebrated in South Africa. You saw that in Paris. You know, all those good speeches. But unfortunately, I think shortly after...
the wire touch somewhere.
That's the expectation.
That's why we are saying foreign intervention, foreign interference. Intervention is good, but interference, African nations must work towards eliminating it. Even if you know, in the coming 5 years, they eliminate only 15 to 20%. We'll be safer than we are.
I think I'll pick from where Wakili has left it, Kim.
Yes.
Talking about foreign intervention is better than foreign interference. Then we need to, if we have to find a solution, then we have to fund our own things, including the Africa Union. If at all the biggest chunk of the funding is coming from somewhere else, they will always call the tune. How can we ensure all African states contribute towards AU? Because I remember early this year, I think it's January or February, where NATO Secretary General said that there's some countries which are not following what we talked about. A percentage of their budget should be in matters defense. Say some countries are contributing a lot, some others are just joyriding or riding along. So how can we ensure that we do everything to the point that there will not be interference? Because I believe if at all we are able to stand on our own 2 feet as the African Union, there will not be any foreign interference.
And that is why I said nobody will come from without to help us manage our affairs as Africa. Geopolitically, the superpowers and the middle powers will only come to Africa for their selfish vested interests. Can we get minerals cheaper than we would get them if Africa was a stable continent with a functional AU? Then why would we want to strengthen the AU to our own detriment? So nobody is coming from without to strengthen us. We are the only people or the only states that can strengthen AU. Now the question is, do we have the goodwill to do so? How many out of the 54 states are willing to contribute for AU to self-fund? How many are willing to abide by decisions that, in actual sense, are to your detriment if you are a demagogue who has chosen that elections will be a mere ritual in your country, because you've chosen whether people want it or not, you are going to remain the president? How many are willing to abide by decisions against corruption?
Just a minute. From what I can see is that the function is about to start. Just swooping in. Man who has been very busy over the last couple of months, that is the Prime Cabinet Secretary.